Hey everybody, County Commissioner Trish DeBerry here. We promised you a show on how to contest your property taxes. And guess what? It is here today. It is your lucky day because we have one of the most premier experts in contesting appraisals at the Bear Appraisal District, Rahul Patel. Thank you so much for the opportunity to spend time with you and be in your office today.
Well, it's a big, a lot of pressure on me to make sure that I give you all the answers you need. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're going to give great tips.
All right, well, I appreciate it.
First and foremost, I made a campaign platform about the fact that we were going to dig into appraisal reform. So guess what? I opened up my mailbox probably about a week ago.
Yeah.
My appraisal went up $15,000. Talked to other people. You would think, logically, we've seen the worst economic downturn probably since the Great Depression. Maybe our property taxes would hold steady. Right. That is not the case. Yeah. They have gone up. Talk to me a little bit about your experience, how unfair you think the system is, how prepared you need to be, and when you pull the trigger on hiring somebody like you.
I would tell you the property tax system in Texas is very, very unique. And I think that creates a lot of challenges at the state and local levels that really are perpetuated by the system that we have. So, to understand really what's happening, I think you have to dig a little bit of how it works. So in Texas, every single piece of property, land, business personal property is valued every single year. That's a monumental task that we put on the appraisal districts at every single level. So just imagine every single home, every single fleet vehicle you have for a business, on January 1, it's supposed to be re-evaluated. Okay? So the value of that. So that's why you're seeing certain things and you say, hey, shouldn't I have held flat? Shouldn't I have held steady? So that's how the system we have. So the appraisal districts for Bear County Appraisal District, they're tasked with going out and valuing everything as it sits today and the value as it was today, not as it was back in last year, maybe March of 2020.
No matter how much you suffered through.
Right. So that's the system that we have, right? So when you see people with sticker shock and you say, how did it go up? Don't forget the year that I just had.
Right.
It's really valued in the instance as if how does it look January 1?
Okay.
And that talks a little bit about why the system and property values are skyrocketing in Texas is basically what's happening across Texas, right? You're seeing a lot of growth, specifically in the residential market. You're seeing all-time lows in supplies, right? Which means home values are continuing to soar. That's why you're seeing increases this year for most people in their mailboxes.
So if I'm headed down to the appraisal district and they talk about the fact, look, first of all, you need to look at what exemptions can you apply for? Because those are important. Talk to me about that.
Well, let's talk about a couple things. Number one, you talked about getting the notices in the mail. So for all of you that got your notices in the mail, know this, there is an appeals process, and we can talk a little bit about that. But those deadlines are on May 15th. So you have every one of you as a property owner in the Bear County and state of Texas, you have the ability to appeal your valuation. So if you're not happy with your value, you believe it's been overvalued, don't forget to file your appeal. And the appraisal district, go ahead.
It's your civic duty
to
do that.
Right, it's just like voting.
Yes.
And yeah, absolutely, right? And you know what? The Bear County Appraisal District has made it very easy for you to file your protest. That's why you're seeing each year the appraisal district saying we're having a record number of protests filed because you can go online at bcad.org and simply go online and file online appeal. So when you fill out the information, you can file your appeal right online. You don't have to go anywhere. So that's number one. Make sure that you file your appeal. That will allow you to make sure that you have every avenue to preserve the value that you're seeking.
Should you take pictures?
Yeah, and so let's talk about it. Let's talk about the appeals process. So once you file your appeal, you'll be able to submit information or you'll be able to go have a hearing. When you do that, what I tell homeowners is, you know your home better than anybody, right? You know the landscape of what's happening and what your current or your home has compared to the others around you. Remember, the appraisal district is tasked with valuing every single home. Just imagine how many parcels there are all across the county, and they have to value that every single year. So they don't know. So the things that people go at and say, hey, how didn't they know that? Why didn't they have this information? I have this issue. You can't access it anymore because 281's doing expansion. Sometimes they don't have that information. So start with the presumption that they don't know everything about your property. So if you have information, you have photos, you've got foundation damages, you've got roof issues, you've got whatever those is, whatever those pieces are, if you have that information and provide that, I will tell you, you'll have a much better chance of getting a reduction, or at least the ear of the appraisal review board, which is tasked with actually hearing your protest.
So typically when you talk about the fact, thousands of homes that they have to appraise, they can't know everything. I've heard too, they send a drone over to be able to take a picture, and base their appraisal on what they can see from the drone. Sometimes, I had a friend who, their appraisal went up because they said they had a garage addition. Well, it was only a carport.
Sure.
So he was able to successfully contest it because he's like, hey, it shouldn't have gone up that much. So to your point, they don't know everything. And the view that they may get from a drone as they're making those appraisals may not show them all the detail.
Correct. And that's what brings it to another point. Like, you have to make sure that the information in your actual appeal or in your home valuation is correct. So if you go on bcad.org, right, type in your CAD number or your information, you'll see each item broken down. You'll see land, improvements, you'll see garage, you'll see concrete, you'll see pool, you'll see lots of line items. So it's very, very important to get that correct. In many instances, you'll see the square footage is incorrect. So you'll believe it's 2,400, but the appraisal district may believe it's 2,800. So again, an item that you should make sure that you bring that information to light to the appraisal district. Same thing sometimes they believe you have an addition and you don't have an addition.
Right.
Maybe there was one there and it was never taken away and you bought the home, you didn't even realize it was there, so make sure that you update that information with the appraisal district.
Okay, so when I looked at my appraisal, really the differentiator for me this year was I saw my land value increase versus improvements to my home. Seems to me it's always been the other way around.
Yeah.
And when I've talked to several people, they've said the same thing. What is that about?
Well, that's an interesting situation. So, land schedules, and so overall, the values of the land in Bexar County for appraisals has not gone up that much.
Okay.
So I think the belief from the county perspective, if I was sitting in the county's perspective, is that land values haven't caught up with actual land values. Now, the flip argument to that is very difficult to debate value of land versus it is to debate value of improvement. So you're going to have to work harder to get the reduction, because the idea is, yes, you brought all this information, but your improvements haven't gone up. It's the land that's gone up. Show us why the land is less valuable today than it was yesterday.
So a little more difficult.
A little more difficult.
Okay. Yeah. So as we talk about exemptions, homestead exemption, critically important. If you don't have that, you need to get it. Veterans, you have the opportunity for an exemption. Let's talk a little bit about the easy stuff we need to check off.
So exemptions are critical. A couple of reasons specifically for residential why it's so important that you make sure you have your exemptions in place. So for a homestead, if you have an exemption and a homestead exemption in place, you are capped. The state legislature does not allow a county to assess the value increase greater than in excess of 10% per year. So that's right there a great tool to make sure that you at least save that as your cap, right? 10% increase. So you want to make sure you have that. On top of that, you get a savings on your taxes because you've got an exemption in place, and you can actually stack some of those, right? So if you have a homestead exemption and you have a veterans or a disability, or you are a surviving spouse of a disabled veteran, those are exemptions that you can get, and they can add on to one another. So very, very valuable. Over 65, I can't stress this enough. If you're over 65, be sure that you have your homestead exemption in place. There are lots of benefits to that. And that brings us to an interesting point of many folks who are over 65 continue to pay a school tax, which is very kind of interesting. And we can talk about the legislature and things they can do. But if you're over 65, make sure you have that exemption in place, because it is a very valuable one.
Okay. So as we talk about overall, funding, really the way we fund education in Texas, the fact that we don't have a state income tax. And look, I'm not in favor of a state income tax in any way, shape, or form, but it puts a lot of pressure on the collection of property taxes. So when you talk about Texas being kind of a unique beast, it's got to be, look, at some point we've got to really dig in. It's got to be bipartisan. We've got to look at global reform when it comes to appraisals.
I think we've got a double-edged sword. We've got some issues, but we also, I think we have maybe some overreaching arms in terms of tax dollars, right? So number one, our property tax dollars go to fund some critical needs that we have. Infrastructure, schools, right? And those are two things we all know we need. We need more infrastructure to be able to get us from point A to point B better, faster, whether it's more city utilities. We need those items. And then we need more schools, right? Because as more people move here, we need schools and we need to make sure we do those. And you've seen, I think, particularly across Bexar County and some states, we've seen a lot of upgrades to our schools, right? Now, the flip side of that is, you have to balance that. We have lots of people also coming here, building new homes, building new businesses, coming in here, and those tax dollars, they're also being added to the overall value. So if you see the budget continue to grow.
Exactly.
Right? And you see the expenditures continue to grow, but yet the tax dollars are also increasing.
Yep.
So they're increasing at each person's level, but they're also increasing because we have new demand and new product and new supply, whereas a state that might be losing residents, losing value, we're not that. So I think there's some balance that needs to be obtained really at the state and the local levels as to how we're increasing the tax dollars.
Yeah. So give me some advice, as a citizen, if I have a complicated case or if I just don't understand, I've, protested before, they've come back, they've given me another increase, as you said, because it's their job to value homes every single year. But when should someone really pull the trigger and hire somebody like you?
You really have to look at two things. If it's a if it's a residential property and you own a piece of residence or a homestead and it's your home, I would tell you that the best course of approach is to if you're able to and you're in the position to, file your own appeal. Okay, because you know more about your home and what's happening in your neighborhood probably than anybody, right? And second, the information is so available today. You can go around, you can find on Realtor.com, you can find Zillow, you can find information. Nextdoor app's got all kinds of information. So much information is available that every dollar you save will go right back to you versus paying any consultant or anyone else for a residential appeal. Now, commercial appeal, completely different. So many nuances in terms of different approaches, whether they use a sales approach, an income approach, a cost approach, and there are lots of variables that are really, really important to protect your business, the leasehold estate, or whatever that might be. So those are kind of the differences, but my suggestion for folks is you know more about your home than anybody. So it should be you that's presenting why it is that the value is too much.
But we're likely going to have some folks that own businesses.
Correct.
And look, not just I'm a small business owner, but medium and large businesses who have not even been in their offices, during the pandemic, have not been able to go to work, but yet they're going to see huge increases. So to your point, commercial, there's nuances. There may be more of a reason to hire an attorney just because it's a little more complicated.
Oh, I would tell you, the commercial businesses, for those that kind of take the position that, it's only hitting the residential folks. I would tell you it is hammering the business owners. So it is impacting you as a homeowner, but it is hammering businesses. I spoke with a business owner yesterday whose tax bill is effectively 40% of the income top line that they actually made. So when you talk about after they paid all their expenses, they're bleeding. There is no way you can afford for 40%. That's like saying if 40% of your income today went towards your home property tax, no way you'd be able to survive. So it is really, really affecting them, and I think it's important to make sure that you balance that because if those businesses struggle to pay that tax bill, it's going to fall back on the shoulders of the residential, and most of those folks, most of us that have a home have a place of business that we go to work at or own, and that's the only way we're able to afford what we have, right? So it's a trickle effect that's going to take place.
And it's almost adding insult to injury. To your point, we've gone through a pandemic. It's been very tough on businesses. There have been loans that have been taken out, and then you're hammered, like you said, by an appraisal. So anyway, great advice. We haven't talked much about, although taking pictures of foundations or repairs, that's important, but really, let's talk a little bit more about comps.
Sure.
So, when you're gathering your data, and you said it's easy to be able to find, if you feel like your house has been overvalued compared to everybody else's, it's easy to be able to find that information, and that's a good argument to make, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of residential, comps are really your number one way to approach what kind of information you're going to provide. Look at your home versus the others. Texas has a couple of different approaches, but in a nutshell, it's called equal and uniform. You as a resident have the right to be equally and uniformly appraised as with those that are similarly situated. So me, I have the ability to be equally and uniformly appraised as you. Now, that also doesn't also mean that if you've got a 2,000 square foot house and I've got a 1,000 square foot house, that you get to be taxed like me, but maybe you look at it per square foot, right? Make some adjustments. So when you look at those comps, be sure to make some adjustments, right? So if that house was 125 square foot but had a metal roof and you've got a shingle roof, well then now you might want to make a downward adjustment, right? That's an improvement above yours. That's got 3.5 bathrooms, you've got 3. Again, who would you rather have, a half bath, or would you like your guests to come into your bathroom, right? So those are the types of things you want to look at to make adjustments or modifications to the comps that you see. It's not a straight line analysis.
Okay. So as we look at changes, really to the Bear Appraisal District, some of the things that I've talked about is really looking at perhaps the chief appraiser being an elected position versus it being an appointed position, or maybe even the board of directors being elected instead of being appointed. Because really, when you look at the construct of the board, there are people that have a vested interest in collecting taxes, whether they're school districts, and so I feel like there's got to be better representation for the taxpayer. And is there? I just wonder what your thoughts are.
We've got again, it goes back to the system we have set up. We have an annual reappraisal system, so every single year, every single parcel. So we put a monumental task from the state level down to each county level to make sure that each property is assessed and assessed correctly. And then we have an appraisal review board that's tasked with then being the independent body to review whether that appraisal was correct. A lot of folks believe that process is not a fair process, right? Who've been there and gone through that. So, again, it goes back to the sheer volume of properties and then to the sheer availability. So what I would encourage you, if you're out there listening, if you have some time, apply to be an appraisal review board member. I think that's something that the appraisal districts genuinely seek. They need more and more people who understand real estate, who understand business. If you're a realtor, you're a former realtor, get out there and do your job and apply to be an appraisal review board member, because the more people that the appraisal district has and the appraisal review board has to select from and opt from that know real estate, the better you're going to be at being able to present an argument to somebody who understands that. So, that's one level, one area where you directly can be an assistance of is, if you have the time, go do that. Go become an appraisal review board member. Now with that, at the state level, lots of changes. We could probably talk about hours about things that the state could do, but I'm sure we don't have that much kind of time. So you let
we don't. Well, and that's an important point, Rahul, is really get involved, because look, it's a lot easier to be appointed and nominated to something than it is to run for office like I did for a year and a half and talk about it. So, the bottom line is I need help, in representation of the taxpayer. So, you're doing your job, I'm doing my job to do what we can to represent the taxpayer. But like I said, it's a lonely job unless we've got some help to be able to do that. So if you're fed up and you're sick and tired of it, then we need your help and you need to apply. So any closing words or closing thoughts? Yeah,
and so this is piece of advice I give everybody as they go through this appeals process. The reaction is almost the same. You get your notice and you're angry.
Sticker shock.
And you go down and you use that. And what I always tell people is my example of when I go to the airport or I go somewhere. Wherever it is I go, if I've got to check into a hotel or go somewhere, I'm trying to get a reservation. If I go there going, I need a table, this is this. Usually I don't get any
traction.
So the reality of it is you need to separate your emotion from the actual situation itself. And that becomes very difficult to do. So I would tell you is if you cannot do that, find somebody to do it. If you can, or you have somebody else in your household, let them do that. If you go there and you approach them with saying, look, this isn't me versus you, this is my information versus the information that you currently have, you will have a much better argument, because you remember, they're hearing thousands of appeals every single year, every single month. So you have to go in there with the approach that says, listen, I get it, here's what I got, but let me show you why this is incorrect and why I believe this is where my value should be. Also have a specific ask. Don't just ask, this is too high. Okay? People always say, okay, well, what do you need? So if you do not have a number to ask or seek for and have some basis, then it's not going to make sense. And this is the last point I give people is, find somebody who will listen to you that doesn't know anything about this, and give them 3 minutes of your time and see if they understand your argument or your position.
Like a little rehearsal.
That's it. And if they don't, then the chances are the appraisal district isn't going to understand it. It's too complex, or you haven't explained it to them well enough. So I looked at it as a dry run. Find a 7-year-old, put them in the corner, see if you can explain to them what it is. If they understand it, then you've got a clear understanding of what your appraisal should be and why it should be lower.
So keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Keep it factual. And keep it logical.
And friendly.
And friendly.
And friendly.
That's right.
Yeah.
My mom always said, catch a lot more flies with honey
That's
than
it.
you do with vinegar. And look, during the campaign when I was block walking, we actually knocked on the door of an employee of the Bear Appraisal District and who, loves his job, loves to be able to help people. So it's not completely adversarial, but what we're saying is you gotta exercise your civic right, and that is get the facts together, go down and make a rational, logical argument, and chances are you might succeed. So listen, folks, you heard it from the best in the business today. I am so glad. We will come back and we'll do another one because my find Rahul to be fascinating and has great information to be able to depart with folks. But until next time, good luck, Godspeed, and we'll see you soon.